So hello and welcome to David Scarlett. David, I remember seeing you speak at one of these sort of technology shows probably about 15, 20 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
And you were talking to a bunch of IFAs, independent financial advisors, about your approach to financial planning and your experience. And I must admit, I was captivated. I found your speech was really interesting, and the information that you were presenting was utterly compelling. I thought you, at that stage, you were probably one of the best speakers I'd ever seen. It's I've seen a lot of speakers, and I remember taking away from that presentation, not the content of your speech at all. I can't remember any of that, but just the sheer professionalism of the way you held yourself and presented yourself to the team. The whole the whole room was captivated. So given that backdrop, tell us about your background and how you ended up doing what you're doing now. I'm really interested to learn more about, obviously, Soul Millionaire. We'll talk about that in a few seconds. But let's tell us about David Scarlett, where you come from and what you're doing.
Love to, and thank you for those comments. So I'm feeling kind of squirmish now, thinking how but what's really scary about your comments just now, introducing myself, and it's great to be with you because we always end up laughing, and I never quite understand why that happens, but it happens. Is crumbs, have we really been around 15 years? I felt really young until I heard that.
Sorry. So, no, I can't quite believe it. I think we spoke the other day, and I mentioned that I've been in the industry for since 1982, and you even before me. And yeah. It's just like, oh, where did it go? Sorry.
A bit of background then. My youth, God, that's a long time ago, Ronan, was spent in what we now call the IT sector. Back in the Jurassic period, we used to call it the computing sector. That's where I grew up in business as a young man, and somehow ended up in financial services. I have to say, didn't enjoy the first year. Was ready to walk out because it just felt an environment I didn't want to work in until I met someone who taught me about business and about marketing. Was an ex-colleague, became a client, and just said, you just need to change the way you approach this thing. This is not about products or flogging things or being a brilliant salesman. This is about, and he just taught me a number of things about business and marketing. And that shifted really my life. That one conversation in Windmill Street in the West End, Soho, where he had built a multi-million-pound business, became very successful, changed my professional life, and I stuck in with financial services to stay the course, and became a fee-based financial planner. Good old Paul Etheridge with his
software. Of course.
So by 1991, I was playing at being a fee-based financial planner. I think I almost got it. So cash flow forecasting and planning and so on and so forth. That's a long time ago. So I do understand, and I spent 20 years in the profession, ended up as part of the financial planning team at Stockbroking Group, and that's where I learned about those two areas of life, financial planning and about really running a business team. I had a great MD at that stage. I had my own firm for a while with 2 offices and 7 staff, and that was great for my ego, but it really was good for my ego, but not very clever for my profit margin. But eventually I became part of Stockbroking Group, and that time called Greg Middleton, and learned a lot from Chris Middleton, the MD, about, this is much more than financial planning. This is about learning how to lead a team and manage a business, because he gave me my own budget, a remit, and so on and so forth. So he was a brilliant coach rather than an MD, and he taught each of us to create our own teams across the nation and run business. So that's my background. I then realized that in the middle of a presentation one day to a group of directors in the north of England, they stopped me in the middle of a presentation. I thought, blimey, I've messed up. I completely screwed up. And this was a big deal for me. It was a big IT group because I specialized in the IT sector.
Yeah.
All of my clients were directors of IT firms, so that I niched there. And this MD stopped me with his board of directors looking on. I thought, I've messed up. And he said, I said, have I said something wrong? Have I offended somebody in the room? And he said, no, I'm just observing, this man said, you really enjoy being up there, don't you? Well, I do actually, presenting the concepts of this group scheme and our services. He said, well, you're really good at that stuff, better than any of us in this room. I thought, oh, how sweet, how embarrassing. And he said, what the heck are you doing playing with financial planning? I thought, oh, right. And that set off a train of thought. This was back in 1999, 2000, set off a train of thought in me which said, actually, I do enjoy that. I enjoy teaching principles and concepts. And I'd also, because of my ministry, my Christian ministry, realized that I love going deep with people in conversations. I love searching questions that don't feel invasive to people. And I thought, oh, so I took those two skills and thought, I actually love doing that more than I love my technical part of financial planning. I wasn't bad. I wasn't the most brilliant financial planner in the world. I was a pension transfer specialist. I'm sure, when you and I were 3 years old, we probably didn't think about we're going to end up being a pension transfer specialist. Probably not a life aspiration, but that's where I ended up. So one day I just woke up, literally on my birthday, and I walked in and I resigned. I said,
as you do.
Yeah, as you do. I just thought, no, there's something else that I'm better at that I find is more of a gift and a talent than my professional skill of financial planning.
Yeah.
And so I took 9 months off, to the horror of my family, with no revenue coming in, just to write a book, step one.
Yeah.
And number two, to use that book to then get on platforms across the country and speak about business rather than just financial planning. So I met with Faye Goddard not long after that, who was then CEO of the Personal Finance Society, I think. And we spent a lot of time talking about the concept that, what's needed in this profession is much more understanding of how to run a small business than how to be a better financial planner. That was being pushed through anyway. The chartered concept was coming through Faye, and she was pushing that agenda through. But we had that conversation. And so, that's my background. That's why I realized, no, I love doing this. I can do that. And I've got my qualifications, and I'm, but I can do this better. And I love it more. And I'm more passionate about lifting people up to run better quality businesses within which brilliant financial planning is done, than myself being a good financial planner.
And was that the birth of Soul Millionaire then? That sort of epiphany almost?
Yeah, the birth of Soul Millionaire was not my idea at all. I thought the name was the most stupid thing I'd ever heard. And it came out of the mouth of my wife, Wendy. She said, so what are you going to call this thing that you've literally just walked out of a really fabulous paying directorship and, with all the pension rights and the company cars and all that kind of stuff, and you ended up with nothing and just a book to write. What are you going to call this crazy thing of yours? And I said, I don't know. I think kind of like the advisor gym where they can work out their business. She said, that's really boring. She said, you work very deep. You work soul deep with each individual, because I've watched you do it.
Yeah.
Because she is the director of my company. And you've said to me, one of your dreams is to be able to touch the lives in business of 1 million business people, which is a bit of a mission impossible, really, isn't it? And this was before.
It's a big target.
This was before the internet was part of our lives. I mean, it was there, but we were never using it. This was 2003, 2004. And so it just really had just emerged as something to use, but none of us knew how to use it. So it was a bit of a bonkers concept. But she said, so what I'm hearing is you want to be, and you're still kind of involved with money, you want to be a soul man, a soul deep man working with, as a coach with people, and you want to touch them in lives. So I guess you're called the Soul Millionaire. And I just burst out laughing. What a ridiculous, how can I walk on a stage in financial services and be announced as the Soul Millionaire? I'd be laughed off stage. They'll think I'm some sort of woo-woo guru from California. But it stuck, and somebody did in the PFS introduce me at a IFP conference, annual conference,
Yeah.
as the Soul Millionaire. I was so embarrassed, but people came up after, that's a brilliant name, was it? I thought, oh, blimey, I've hit upon something. So that's where it came from. I then
Fantastic.
wrote a book called The Soul Millionaire, about a story about a guy who changes his lives and then touches other people's lives. And Roland, it just stuck. Whether I liked it or not, it just stuck. But now it's a big brand thing for us.
Of course. And so here you are 20 years later. And how's that journey gone? I mean, you know, starting out with a concept, with an idea that you want to help people make better business. I mean, there are so many people who do that sort of thing, but to do it with credibility, you know, demands a depth of understanding and knowledge of the businesses that you're working with. So how's that gone for you? How's that sort of worked out?
First 3 years was absolutely terrifying. So a piece of advice for anybody watching this: never ever walk out of a professional advisory role and become a coach, an author, and a speaker. Just don't do it, because you learn nothing for the first couple of years. I mean,
and to be fair, you just don't want the competition, is what you're saying.
Right.
Is that's what I'm hearing?
Don't do it. You can't stand the competition. So the first 3 years were very scary, really, for anybody doing that. But I stuck at it and met some wonderful, helpful people. People were just very kind, allowing me to speak on stage about concepts that I was only working through my own mind. So I wasn't an expert at anything. But something just clicked. And I found that I love coaching people one-on-one. I love the buzz of gathering a group around in a masterclass or a workshop and seeing them go ding, you know, the light bulb moments we all have. Seeing that in front of you is very addictive. And so I think the answer to your question, how has it gone, is really tough for the first few years, but then still having lots of fun, learning a lot from people clearly brighter than me. So that's the second thing I learned. There are people out there a lot brighter than me. And as I coach them in changing their thinking and behavior, I learned a lot about creative thinking, really creative financial planners out there who don't think like financial planners, they think like entrepreneurs. Massive I've learned from them. And because I've always had to be 2 or 3 steps ahead, you can't run a workshop if you're behind the curve. It has forced me to study so many brilliant leaders, brilliant thinkers, and creators of brilliant businesses. And that has been a phenomenal education. So like you, Roland, you know, up in my shed quarters, as I call it, my office garden, when he calls it my international shed quarters, is a lot of books, you know, rows and rows of books I've had to study. So I have had to learn things that have just changed my life.
Wow.
And then in order to pass that on in some sort of coherent fashion. So you've learned and I've learned, if you're going to teach somebody something powerful, you had better know your stuff. And, and so in the early days, a masterclass used to take me 10 weeks of constant reading to prepare for.
Wow.
Not 10 hours, 10 weeks of reading and studying and making notes to create a 6-hour masterclass. That was painful. I'm really glad I did it. So I've learned a lot. I've met some really amazing people, clever, but creative and good people. So in this profession, Roland, I've learned, there's a lot of ugliness in the industry. Sure there is, from the background and history that we've all walked through. But there are some amazingly good people who genuinely care about the way they touch clients' lives, really care, and are very clever at doing it. I've learned from them. So, I've had a great time.
Fabulous. And I think the important thing there for people in business, and I'm sure this will resonate with a lot of successful people who've spent the time building a quality, valuable business, is the recognition that it probably takes about 20 years to become an overnight success, doesn't it?
Yes.
It's the persistency test, you know, when you're confronted with all of those challenges, like, oh my God, how am I going to pay the mortgage next month when I've got the payroll to reach as well? Yes. It's how you address those items, overcome them. And that in itself is a really great way of learning and expanding your horizons and your ability to cope with change, which of course is continuous. And I guess if I'm reading you right, all of that experience and all of that study, you've brought together and are able to focus in to help those people cut through a lot of the learning they would otherwise have to do themselves. Is that fair?
Yes, it is fair, because when people work with me and those doing similar things to myself, like Brett and so on and so forth, we do take them on a very clear, coherent journey.
Yeah.
We don't say this is the only way to do things or even the best way, but this is a way to create something that's much more exciting, much more effective, definitely much more fun, and hugely more commercially successful. So I take people on a journey, and they ride with me through a journey that I've been through, and it's not easy, and they are forced to change themselves before they can then change their team and their clients' lives.
Yeah.
And that's not easy. That's painful to go through, but to walk with me on that journey to come out with a business that Roland impacts other people's lives, not just their money, but their lives.
Yeah.
That is a very exciting, powerful process. So I love walking with them on that journey, and hand holding and walking on the same path as them and seeing them change. So what I've seen in front of me, and this is what I love doing, is people are capable of transformation, not just marginal change, actual transformation.
Yeah.
I see men crying in front of me because their lives and their teams are changing, and they realize I was the blockage, now I'm the enabler, and my whole life is changing. That just, to do that as a job.
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, it is very rewarding, and exactly the same place, of course, financial advisors, although they probably don't recognize at a fundamental level, what their role is. I mean, I used to be a financial advisor, as you know, and it only really strikes you when you see the consequences of your work. And the number of occasions where, we've given advice about the need for critical illness or protection or whatever. And, of course, there's always that feeling in the back of your mind, am I selling insurance for the sake of it? But actually, if you go right back to first principles, the whole essence of financial planning is protection, retirement, investment, savings, mortgages, is getting the order right, because it doesn't matter how much you invest, you can never earn enough to make a difference if something happens. And there have been numerous occasions where something did happen. There were a couple of occasions where it happened literally the next month after the first premium. And to see somebody pay 50 quid and walk away with £100,000 to help them cater or address the changes and focus on what they needed to focus on, which was getting better, was quite extraordinary. And so the ability for financial advisors to help and empower their clients, face the future with much more confidence, again, is really critical. So it's that recognition, I guess, and helping firms understand that, or businesses and business people to understand that actually, it's business is a dynamic and forever changing world, and you need to be open to change. Otherwise, you start going backwards. And I guess, just because you've done things one way forever doesn't mean that that's the right way. And the old adage, doing the same thing expecting a different outcome is the first sign of madness, is so true, isn't it? And I think if you can then enable people to confront that fact and look at things differently, it's quite extraordinary. So it seems to me that actually where you have derived an enormous amount of personal satisfaction in your career is that sort of direct impact you have on people face to face, around the desk, if you like, or around the fireside, and helping them move on and grow. And so how has the last year, I mean, we're on the anniversary of the beginning of the pandemic in the UK, how's that impacted you, your business, and your ability to engage? Because, I mean, this is fantastic, this ability to sort of go face to face, very convenient, but how do you sort of maintain that very personal relationship when you've got a computer screen in front of you and you can't feel that, shake the flesh, so to speak, meet the person and shake the hand. How have you coped with that? This has been an interesting year.
It's been a real learning curve for all of us, particularly for financial planners who are used to being face-to-face, one-to-one, shaking hands and sitting in a room together. What I've learned is, so the education for me, Roland, is recognizing that my ability to listen more deeply has been significant in this kind of use of technology.
Yeah.
So what this technology forces you to do is to not tailgate each other's conversation, not interrupt each other, because it creates a problem, and to listen much more deeply, and it's blooming hard work. It's tiring.
Yeah.
But I've learned by doing that, and also by finding ways of bringing my client group, we call them we call them the tribe, but this is the inner tribe, kind of 12 people with whom I work intensely. Bringing them together more often has been critical.
Yeah.
So before we used to have a definite pattern of coaching. Now we also include things like monthly powwows. We'll get the whole group together and so on and so forth. And they love that. They love that. And also what I've done is I used to coach a couple of individuals in a financial planning firm, and each of them became very, very skilled coaches by going on professional coaching courses. I mean, they're mustard at it. And so I invite them to be my facilitator, and they run the meetings for me brilliantly, so I can spend more time talking one-on-one with each of 12 people around the table. So it's forced me to be more skilled at engaging intimately with groups of my clients and individuals of my clients. And that's a skill that this problem, this pandemic, I think has forced upon many of us.
Yeah.
I talk to leaders when they faced up to it, when I asked them the question, how often do you talk to each member of your direct reporting team? So you have how many people in your firm now, Roland?
Me, 50. We're going to take on another 30 in the next year and a half.
Yeah, and you're a director of the firm, and what you and I know is you can't have 50 direct reports. You could have 4 or 5. But what I found with each of the leaders at the beginning of the pandemic is they really weren't talking to their direct reports that often. They kind of floated by each other physically in the office and assumed therefore they were communicating. When I tested it with them, they weren't.
Yeah.
And so what they found absolutely critical in this pandemic lockdown situation was, I have to talk more than once a week or once a month to my direct reports to lift them up in a very difficult life situation. And by doing that, I've found I've helped my clients become better leaders and run better businesses, and they've helped their team become a much more creative, enjoyable, fun-loving, productive team. So they've had to change, but I have too.
Fantastic. And I think that, I mean, I'm sure this comment has been made numerous times about the pandemic. What it has done is it accelerated the use of technology massively, and also, most importantly, accelerated the acceptance of technology across the globe, actually. And whereas before financial advisors would never have thought about doing this sort of face-to-face interaction, now I think this is going to be the preferred way of dealing with your clients on a more frequent basis. Yes, of course, maybe the initial meeting, say hello, get face-to-face, that sort of makes sense and feels about right. But beyond that, it's so much more efficient, isn't it? You could have easily 12 calls a day, with clients, just focusing in on the particular issue that needs to be addressed, deal with it, move on. So the efficiency is massively improved, but also the impact on, I think, people's well-being. And this might sound counterintuitive. You're no longer having to sit on a train or get stuck in a traffic jam for hours to spend, maybe half an hour with a client and then get back in the car and drive back to where you've come from, which is so wasteful. And on the environment, of course, it's terribly damaging, as we've all begun to recognize. So I think, the impact has been phenomenal. I think if we can, it's going to be interesting to see what happens, in the new normal post-pandemic, and how people's attitudes will change towards this sort of engagement, and also use of offices and going to places. It's going to be really interesting to see how things are going to evolve. And so, from your perspective, and given what we've just talked about, what signs and what encouraging signs are you seeing in financial services, in the financial planning sector specifically? What are the sort of the key takeaways that you're beginning to see happen now?
Yeah, so I'm finding, as great insights there about technology. I'm finding that my clients and those that I speak to in conferences, online and webinars and this, that, and the other, are finding that they're having to learn new skills in order to better serve their clients. I was talking to somebody just before this conversation. We had a 2-hour coaching conversation, and he has found, because he has been forced to use technology to communicate weekly with every client using a podcast, he has found that he's able to comfort and serve, often with laughter and enjoyment within the podcast, laughing at himself, laughing at the world. And his clients have come back to him during the lockdown to thank him for helping them feel less lonely. So that's a skill set he's been forced to learn, simply to not sit there thinking, oh, I wonder what's happening to my clients. He's made the agenda using technology. So that has been a benefit of being forced to think differently and behave differently. And so I think what's happening, Roland, certainly my perspective, and I only deal with a few people and only see hundreds. You probably see far more than me during the course of a year. But what I'm seeing happening is we are being forced to question the skills that we've developed and ask ourselves the question, is there a different way of behaving here? That after being forced, and we kick and scream when we're forced, we don't like being forced to do something. We're a bit independent, aren't we? We're a bit, we're unemployed.
Sure.
But having been forced to do this, have I learned something new that actually could better serve my clients? I think that's a great question.
I think it's a fundamental question, actually, because I think far too many firms get comfortable with the way they do it, and just because they do it this way, they think that that's what their clients value. What is really interesting, and I often, when I'm in a sort of presentation situation, I'll often ask the question of clients, what do your clients value about your service, and when was the last time you actually asked them? Because people assume that just because that they've been preparing sort of annual reports, review reports, 56 pages of stuff, of data, they lavish hours on the production of these reports, send them off to the clients. Do they ever follow up and actually ask what their clients do with them? My guessing is that a lot of that stuff goes straight in the bin, because who wants to sit there reading a 56-page report about, so the ability to challenge and question the service proposition. What is it that adds value to your life? What do you actually appreciate about the relationship that you have with me? If there was one thing that we would do more of in our relationship, what would it be? And actually get to the nub of it, because if you can then filter through the guff and just get to the really important stuff, then that surely lays the foundation for a much more fruitful and beneficial relationship both ways.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'm just going through an exercise with a client right now as we speak, and we had a 2-hour conversation this week, whereby he chose not to use a technology solution to this for different reasons. He chose to use good old-fashioned phone calls, but he outsourced those phone calls so it wasn't a biased phone call. And there were 24 very deep conversations lasting about an hour each, which have produced pages and pages of reports. A number of things have come as a result of that kind of questioning, Roland. In other words, not accepting or not assuming that because we think we're brilliant, that the clients must also think so too.
Okay.
What he has discovered has changed the feelings of the whole team about their work. Every power planner administrator realizes, oh crumbs, they're saying that they love us, They're saying that we liberate them, language like that. They're saying that their lives are changing because of us. So there's this team in this firm, let's just say half a dozen to 8 people, whose working life has been transformed by actually asking appropriate questions that
And that's it, isn't it?
never been asked. So they now feel better about going to work every day. And he has found things that he thought were very clever in his marketing material on his website. The clients are saying, that's not clever at all. In fact, we think it's a bit bonkers. What we love about you is totally unnecessary. What we love about you is this.
Yeah.
And so here's a firm, here's a group of human beings working their socks off, as financial planners do, for years, doing things that are not appreciated by their clients and missing what the clients love about them. They do love them. And once they discovered it, it's completely changed their lives. So I agree with you.
It's a Sorelli Associates, isn't it? Right back to the 2007 research that they did. How are advisors or financial planners spending their time? What is it that their clients value from the service? And it's a complete mismatch.
Yes.
And I think, if it's possible through help and just challenging those perceptions to point them in the right direction, and actually, as you say, give them something that is much more meaningful and much more valuable, much less hassle actually, then that's got to be good for all. So we've seen the impact of the pandemic, and we've seen the challenges. We've seen how those challenges have been addressed, and how people have very rapidly adopted change, and I think very positively too. What more change would you like to see? What other opportunities are there now for this new enlightened world, digitally, embracing digital transformation to deliver the services? What else would you like to see happen? How would you like to see sort of businesses develop now?
Great question. And you happen to catch me and us, all 12 of us, that I'm working with, almost like a think tank, at a very interesting point where we're asking that question, exactly that question. And we've come up with 3 things that we think are important. Other people might not, but this is what we see. So we've realized that the clients I've worked with over the last, say, 5 years, and the groups I've worked with, when they decide to include things in their skill set, like professional coaching skills merge with financial planning skills, when those 2 skill sets come together and are combined, the quality of relationship, so that's number 1, quality of relationship with the client transforms. I mean, not just marginally, it transforms. And I've seen people, financial planners, Roland, who've multiplied their one-on-one client fees, per client fees, by anywhere up to 8 times.
Wow.
Now that's not hyperbole. That's the data. That's the science.
Wow.
That's the measurable impact. Not because of me, because they made that change. The second thing we've seen is we've decided to spend much more time on helping founders and current leaders become leaders, not managers.
Yeah.
And we've brought in people into our coaching team and into our client team who specialize in working with leadership, not management. So picking up on Stephen R. Covey, you can manage processes, systems, and projects, but you have to learn how to lead people. So we've spent the last 5 years studying hard and bringing people around me who are better than me at this leadership skill development to help our clients become not better financial planners or even better money earners or even better client winners, but better leaders of people and understand the science of that. So that's something we're focusing on that I think is I can't find anywhere in this profession or in the financial services industry, particularly around financial advice, where there is a leadership educational process to teach leaders how to be leaders. So I made a comment to a group of leaders recently which said, look, the minute you take on a member of staff, your job changes.
Yeah.
Their job changes. You're no longer a financial planner. You're a leader of another human being. Their home life is impacted by your behavior. Their family is impacted by how they go home at night after working with you for a day, which can often be a disastrous experience. You can diminish and destroy them and not even know you're doing it. because you simply don't understand leadership skills.
Yeah.
So I think there's a huge gap that we would like to certainly impact to help great financial planners, caring, compassionate people be better leaders of people and create the next generation of leadership in this profession, which desperately needs it.
Yeah.
Where are
It's
the
very
next
true.
leaders? Where's the next? So I love what next gen planners are doing. I love it. People may think they're competitors of ours. No, they're doing a great job at that level. The third thing we noticed in really interesting experience with Philippa Han, the solicitor based in Bristol, who's managing director of litigation of a 750 person firm and head of financial services of that firm. She's a bright lady and she knows what she's talking about in financial services. She meets regularly with the FCA. She meets regularly with the politicians. She meets with the Keith Richards of the world. And she realized that the British Steel fiasco is an example of not that people wake up wanting to hurt other people. That's not what's going on at all in where people go wrong in this profession. It's they simply don't understand that you need to understand that there's a culture, the science called culture. It's not a soft thing. It's not a woo-woo thing. It's not an esoteric thing. It's, do you know how to create the science of creating a business that has a deep culture? If you don't, whatever your strategy and tactics are, that will get eaten up and spat out by the culture you've created. And so things like the British Steel fiasco is not people getting up and wanting to be bad in the morning and hurt other people. It's they have no idea how to create a culture where their noble intentions are put to work every day on the ground floor. Not a clue. And so we've realized that the FCA have signaled to us as an industry and a profession, you had better understand how to create the culture in your firm and do it scientifically as a leader. Otherwise, we're going to knock on your door. And so culture, leadership and coaching, we think are professional skills and essential sciences that need to be brought into the financial planning profession. And that's what we're about for the next 3 years.
Fascinating, because these are not skills that are taught, are they?
No.
You know, it's such a niche issue, and I think so important because it does define, as you say, the essence of business, and it sums up the whole relationship thing that is so critical in something so personal as money. Yeah. You know, and the impact that will have on people's lives. You know, it's fundamental almost. Yes. So fascinating stuff. So what next, Soul Millionaire? What are you up to? You know, what's going to happen next? What's the plan look like?
Well, the plan looks like, and this is why I'm so tired today. The plan looks like we spent the last 6 months developing all that we do to make sure it goes online, and other people have done that very well, like Brett, and Paul, and so on and so forth. So we're going to take the whole of my book that I wrote back in 2019, which you probably have a copy of, The Flight of the Soul Millionaire, all that I've learned over 20 years and 20 years as a financial planner, and make sure that's in a multimedia online program. It's not a course. We're talking about a 3-year program, essentially for leaders or wannabe leaders in the financial planning profession. So that's, and we put together this 12-man think team, a 12-person think team to help us develop that, and that will be launched this year. So that's on the cards, and that's getting ready for launch. Secondly, we will create a coaching course and a coaching academy to teach financial planners how to work more deeply and meaningfully with their clients, not just their clients' money, but their clients' lives. Yeah. And how to merge those two things together. And thirdly, we feel now that we've spotted this really strange gap in what financial planners learn in their businesses, there is a need for a leadership academy, and we are creating that, teaching brilliant financial planners, caring, clever people, how to be superb leaders. So that's what's ahead for us in the next 2 years.
Wow, it sounds a really exciting journey, David, and I'm keen to keep in touch with your progress. I think it's fascinating. Thank you. And yeah, be good to learn and see, you know, just what you're creating as part of that process. So fascinating. And in terms of people wanting to know more, what next for them? How can they get to know you and learn more about what you guys are doing and be involved?
Okay, so there's a pretty boring average website up at the moment, the soulmillionaire.com. It's pretty and it's beautiful, but it's not there to do much. So we're converting that in the next 4 weeks to make sure it's much more interactive, with a library of everything we've created, everything over the last 10, 15 years. So that will be launched, so they can contact me either soulmillionaire.com, or better, just an email, david@soulmillionaire.com. And I had one of those this morning. Please, can you help our team develop this out of nowhere? So yeah, and we'll be creating reports and guides. They're already on the shelf, ready to come out and pour out in April, May, June, and through to September, October, November. So yeah, there's stuff ready for people to pick up and read and study, and hopefully change their lives and their business. And then, once they've sort of contacted me, I'll make sure that they receive news about the new programs, the new courses, the academies, and so on and so forth. So yeah, david@soulmillionaire.com, or go to soulmillionaire.com website and we'll contact you.
Fantastic. Well, we'll put all of your contact details on our website as well, so accompanying this video. But David, thank you so much for your time today. It's been really lovely to catch up and to hear what you're doing, and also to hear your views in terms of business and where you've come from, etc. It's been really nice and enjoyable.
Can I wish you good fortune? I mean, you've worked your socks off to get to where you are. You and I both know what it's like, waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning and thinking, is ever going to work? We know that. And you've been there and back and come up again, like a phoenix out of nowhere. So I'm really excited to see what happens at Time for Advice over the next few years, because this could be really exciting.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. David Scarlett, thank you very much indeed. The Soul Millionaire, ladies and gentlemen.
Good. Thanks very much, Ron. Lovely being with you.
And you. See you soon.